Amara Johnson had always been known for her quiet strength and graceful presence. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed to speak loudly to be noticed. Her calm voice, warm smile, and kind eyes always made people feel respected and valued. She was married to Richard Cole, a successful businessman and CEO of one of the fastest-growing companies in the city. Together, they looked like the perfect couple, beautiful, elegant, and powerful. But behind the charming smiles, their relationship was not as perfect as everyone believed. Richard was a man who loved control. He liked being admired, praised, and seen as the smartest person in every room. When he married Amara, he thought of her as the perfect trophy wife, beautiful, supportive, and always beside him during big events. But what Richard didn't see was that Amara was much more than just a pretty face. She was well-educated, thoughtful, and had an eye for details that even he often missed. She had a degree in economics and could easily have built her own career, but she had chosen to support him when he started his business. It was a decision she made out of love, but over time, Richard began to take that love for granted. He started making small remarks, teasing her about her opinions, ignoring her ideas, and sometimes even calling her too emotional. Amara never fought back. She believed in peace and hoped that one day he would realize her value again. One evening, Richard hosted a grand celebration to mark the 10th anniversary of his company. The ballroom was filled with more than 200 guests, investors, media reporters, friends, and employees. The chandeliers sparkled, the tables were decorated with white roses, and the air smelled of success and money. Amara looked stunning in a simple yet elegant black gown. She stood beside Richard, smiling and greeting guests, though deep inside, she felt slightly out of place. The speeches began. Richard walked up to the stage with confidence, speaking about his journey, his struggles, and his achievements. Everyone clapped and cheered. Amara listened proudly, though she wished he would also thank the people who had supported him through the years, especially the employees who worked late nights and gave their best to his company. When he paused for a sip of water, Amara leaned in and whispered softly, "Maybe you could mention the staff too. They've worked so hard for this." Richard gave her a quick look, the kind that said he didn't like being interrupted. Then he smiled at the audience and, into the microphone, said loudly, "That's why I handle the speeches, darling. You just look pretty and let me do the thinking." For a second, silence filled the room. The sound of his voice echoed, and all eyes turned toward Amara. A few people laughed nervously, unsure if it was meant as a joke. Cameras flashed. Her smile froze. Her heart dropped, but her face didn't show it. She stood still, her chin lifted slightly, her eyes calm, refusing to show the pain that had just struck her so deeply. Inside, however, she felt crushed. The man she had supported, the man she believed in, had just insulted her in front of 200 people. Not privately, not as a mistake, but as a way to show his power. He didn't even realize how much it hurt. For him, it was just a joke. But for her, it was a wound. The rest of the evening went on as if nothing had happened. People clapped at his closing words, the music started again, and waiters served champagne. Amara stayed polite. She smiled at guests, accepted compliments about her dress, and kept her dignity intact. But deep down, she knew something had changed forever. Later that night, in the car on their way home, Richard was in a great mood. He talked about how well the event went, how important investors were impressed, and how much money he expected to make in the next quarter. Amara stayed quiet. Finally, he noticed and said lightly, "Why so serious? Don't tell me you're upset about that little joke." Amara turned to look at him. "A joke?" she said softly. "Do you know how it felt to be called dumb in front of everyone? You embarrassed me, Richard, and you didn't even realize it." Richard waved his hand dismissively. "You're overreacting." People laughed, didn't they? "They know I didn't mean it." Amara looked out of the window. The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes, though she didn't let them fall. She realized that the man sitting beside her no longer saw her as an equal partner. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that she was once his biggest supporter, the one who believed in him before anyone else did. When they reached home, she quietly went to their bedroom, changed out of her gown, and stood by the window. She remembered the early days of their marriage when they used to dream together. Back then, he listened to her ideas and called her brilliant. Now he mocked her for even speaking. That night, as Richard fell asleep proud of his big evening, Amara stayed awake. She wasn't angry anymore. She was thinking. thinking about her life, her choices, and how she had slowly lost her own voice trying to help someone else shine. The next morning, she woke up early, made breakfast as usual, and smiled when Richard left for work. But her mind was already made up, not about leaving him, but about finding herself again. She realized that silence had protected her dignity last night, but it would not define her forever. From that day forward, Amara decided she would not let anyone make her feel small again. She started reading again, revisiting her old notebooks filled with business ideas and dreams she once had. Each page reminded her that she was not dumb, she was just unseen. What happened that night became a turning point in her life. The woman who once stayed quiet now carried a calm determination in her heart. She didn't know how yet, but she promised herself that one day she would make Richard and the world and see who she truly was. The days after the party were strangely quiet in the Cole household. Amara spoke less, smiled less, and spent more time by herself. Richard barely noticed. He was busy with meetings, interviews, and new projects. In his mind, everything was fine. His company was growing, his name was everywhere, and life was perfect. But for Amara, something had changed deeply inside. She could not forget the way he looked at her that night. The laughter, the whispering among guests, the awkward smiles, and all of it kept replaying in her mind. Every time she remembered it, her chest tightened. Yet she didn't want to cry anymore. She wanted to understand herself again. Amara had once dreamed of building a career. She had studied hard, earning a degree in economics, and had even worked for a short time before marriage. But when she married Richard, he asked her to focus on the family. "You don't need to work," he had said. "You'll have everything you want." At first, she agreed. She thought they were building a dream together. But slowly, that dream became his alone. One morning, after Richard left for the office, Amara sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her old laptop. She opened it for the first time in years. The screen flickered to life and she found old files. Her college projects, her research notes, her essays on business ideas. She started reading them one by one. Each word felt like a part of herself coming back to life. She smiled softly, remembering the woman she used to be. Confident, curious, and full of ideas. As she read, an idea started forming in her mind. She thought about all the small business owners she met in her neighborhood. Talented people who struggled to manage money or understand markets. Amara realized she could help them. She still had the knowledge. She just needed to start using it again. So quietly and without telling anyone, she began working. She reached out to a few young entrepreneurs she knew from her community. People who were trying to grow their small businesses but didn't have proper guidance. She offered to help them create plans, understand profits, and make smart choices. At first, they were surprised. They knew her only as the wife of a big CEO, not as someone who understood business. But after one or two meetings, they began to see how sharp her mind was. Every day, Amara spent hours researching, writing, and planning. Her dining table became her small office. Papers, notebooks, and charts filled the space where once she had served dinner parties. She worked with focus and peace. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Meanwhile, Richard continued living in his own world of success. He noticed Amara was busier than usual, but he assumed she was just spending time on hobbies. "You look serious these days," he joked one night. "Are you planning to start a fashion club or something?" Amara smiled gently. "Something like that," she replied, keeping her plans private. She didn't want to explain, and not yet. Weeks turned into months. The small businesses Amara helped began to grow. One young designer she worked with got a big order from a local boutique. Another woman who ran a home-baked goods business doubled her income within a month. They all credited Amara for their progress. Slowly, word began to spread. People started calling her for advice. Then something unexpected happened. One of the small companies she helped entered a business competition for startups, and won. The prize was a large investment and a feature in a popular magazine. When the article came out, it mentioned Amara as the strategic mind behind the success. Her photo appeared beside the team, and her name was printed in bold letters. Richard saw the magazine during breakfast. At first he blinked, not believing what he was seeing. "Amara Johnson?" He read aloud. "That's you?" Amara looked up from her coffee, calm and polite. "Yes," she said softly. "I've been helping a few businesses lately." Richard frowned, clearly surprised. "Helping? This says you're their main advisor. When did this even happen? She smiled gently. While you were busy with your company, she replied. For a few moments, Richard said nothing. He wasn't angry, he was confused. He had always believed he was the clever one, the leader, the visionary. The idea that his wife, the same woman he once called dumb in front of hundreds, had done something this impressive quietly and successfully made him uncomfortable. Over the next few weeks, Amara's work continued to grow. She began speaking at local business events and mentoring young people. Her advice was practical, simple, and full of wisdom. People loved her energy and calm confidence. Soon she was invited to a regional business conference to share her story. As she stood on stage that day looking at the crowd, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: pride in herself. She spoke clearly and passionately about her journey, about helping others believe in their own ideas, and about how respect and kindness build stronger partnerships than power and pride. The audience applauded loudly. Reporters wrote about her speech the next day. When Richard saw the coverage, he couldn't stop thinking about her words. He watched the video online, hearing her speak with quiet authority, and for the first time he truly saw her, not as a shadow behind him, but as a light of her own. The realization hit him hard. He remembered the night he mocked her, and shame filled his heart. That evening he came home early and found her reading on the couch. "You were amazing," he said honestly. Amara looked up and smiled faintly. "Thank you. I didn't know you could speak like that. You were so confident." "I've always been this way, Richard," she replied softly. "You just never looked closely enough to see it." Her words were not meant to hurt him, but they hit deeper than anything else she could have said. He nodded quietly and left the room, his mind full of regret. In the days that followed, Amara continued her work. She didn't do it to prove anything anymore, and she did it because it made her happy. Helping others grow reminded her that her purpose was never to stand behind someone else, but to walk beside them and or even ahead when needed. By now, her small consulting group had turned into a registered business. She hired 2 assistants and continued to work with integrity. People admired her not only for her intelligence but also for her humility. She never spoke badly about her husband or the past. She simply let her actions tell the story, and though she didn't realize it yet, this journey was leading her toward a moment that would change everything. A moment when she would finally stand face to face with the man who once mocked her, in a place where the power would be hers. Months passed since Amara began rebuilding her life quietly. Her small consulting business had grown into a recognized enterprise, and she was now seen as a leader, a mentor, and a problem solver. People came to her for advice, guidance, and inspiration. Her calm, confident presence made others feel understood and respected. Every day she woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Richard, on the other hand, was beginning to notice the shift. At first he tried to dismiss it. "She's just lucky," he told himself. But he couldn't ignore the fact that Amara's reputation was spreading quickly. Articles in the business press featured her, social media praised her insights, and even his colleagues began asking questions about the mysterious woman helping these young businesses succeed. One evening, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was for a high-profile charity gala hosted by a national business organization, an event that celebrated successful entrepreneurs and their contributions to society. To Richard's surprise, Amara was not just invited. She was listed as a keynote speaker and one of the honored guests for her work mentoring small businesses. When Richard read the invitation, he felt a mix of shock, pride, and unease. He had imagined that she would stay quietly in the background forever. Now she was taking the spotlight, the same spotlight he had always considered his territory. The night of the gala, the ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, soft music, and elegantly dressed guests. This time it was Amara who entered first, walking with calm confidence. Cameras clicked, journalists whispered, and people turned to watch her. She was wearing a simple but stunning gown that highlighted her grace without demanding attention. Yet she commanded the room. Richard arrived later, expecting to charm the crowd as usual. But as he walked in, he noticed that people were greeting Amara warmly, discussing her achievements and praising her for the difference she had made. He tried to approach her casually, but every step he took seemed slower, as if the world had already shifted around her. When it was time for the speeches, Amara walked to the podium. The audience erupted in applause. She smiled softly, thanked the organizers, and began to speak. "My journey," she said, her voice calm and clear, "started quietly. I worked with people who had talent but lacked direction. I helped them organize their ideas, plan their actions, and believe in themselves. Along the way, I discovered something important, that respect, encouragement, and understanding are far more powerful than criticism."
Pride or power? She paused and looked around the room.
Making eye contact with many people. Then with deliberate calmness, she added, "Sometimes life gives us critics who call us names, dumb, incapable, or unworthy. But those voices only remind us how strong we are when we refuse to believe them. Every insult, every doubt, every moment of humiliation is an opportunity to rise, to grow, and to show the world what we are truly capable of." The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, and journalists quickly captured every moment. Richard felt a strange mix of pride and shame. The woman he had belittled months ago was now speaking with authority and inspiration that he could not match. He remembered the night at his own gala, the moment he had called her dumb in front of 200 people. Now she was standing taller than anyone in that room, including him. After the speech, people lined up to congratulate her. Investors, business owners, and reporters spoke to her with respect and admiration. Richard approached cautiously, unsure of what to say. "You were amazing," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I didn't realize." Amara looked at him, calm and composed. Her eyes held no anger, only clarity and quiet strength. "I've always been this way, Richard," she said softly. "You just didn't take the time to see it." For a moment, Richard didn't know how to respond. Pride, shame, and regret swirled inside him. He realized he had underestimated the woman he married, the woman he claimed to love. In trying to dominate her, he had only highlighted his own insecurities. Amara continued, not harshly but with gentle authority. "What matters is not what people say about us, but what we do with that energy. You have the power to build, to inspire, and to lead, but so do I, and I will never let anyone make me feel small again." Richard nodded silently. He understood fully for the first time that his previous behavior had been wrong. But he also understood something else, that Amara's strength and brilliance were not about hurting him or proving him wrong. They were about her own growth, her own dreams, and her own courage. Later that evening, after the gala ended, Amara spoke briefly with some young entrepreneurs she had mentored. She gave them advice, listened to their stories, and encouraged them to keep moving forward. She didn't need recognition. The joy of helping others was enough. Richard watched from a distance, reflecting on his own life. He realized that the woman he had tried to silence had become unstoppable, not because of him, but in spite of him. He had once thought he controlled the story, but now he understood that true power lies in respect, knowledge, and the courage to follow your own path. As the night drew to a close, Amara and Richard walked toward the exit together. There was no tension, no shouting, no blame, only a quiet understanding. She had reclaimed her dignity, her voice, and her purpose. He had learned a lesson he would never forget. "I'm proud of you," Richard said quietly. Amara smiled. "Thank you," she replied. Then she added, "But I'm not proud because I wanted your approval. I'm proud because I trusted myself and kept moving forward." And with that, she walked out of the gala, leaving behind a trail of admiration, inspiration, and respect. Richard followed, humbled and thoughtful, finally realizing that the woman beside him was not just his wife. She was a leader, a visionary, and someone who could never be underestimated again. From that night on, everything changed. Amara continued to grow her business, mentor young entrepreneurs, and inspire countless people with her story. Richard became a quieter, more respectful partner, learning to support her without overshadowing her. Together, they found a new balance, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and the recognition that true power does not come from belittling others, but from lifting them up. And for Amara, the memory of that humiliating night at the first gala became a reminder, not of shame, but of strength. It was the night that sparked a journey of courage, resilience, and triumph that no insult could ever take away.